Kicked out as a teen for false rumors spread by my brother, years later parents see my success, and demand money after they abandon me. I am a 28-year-old female with a twin brother. Growing up, my twin brother and I experienced very different treatment from our parents. My parents genuinely seemed convinced for some reason that my brother was destined for greatness, while I was the so-called black sheep, just because I was more interested in playing sports or making new friends than studying. They constantly compared us, which was demoralizing and bruised my self-esteem from a young age. As a child, I had to watch my brother have extravagant parties on our birthday with his friends while I was treated like an afterthought. He often had sleepovers with his friends, while I was never even allowed to bring my friends back to our place. To be honest, I loathed every minute of my childhood. The only person in the family who seemed to care about me was my grandmother. When she visited us, she always brought me my favorite chocolates and occasionally slipped a few dollars to me so that I could treat myself later. As the years passed, this blatant favoritism for my twin brother gradually transformed into emotional abuse directed at me. My parents would openly mock my grades and belittle my hobbies. It felt as though no matter how much I tried, I could never meet their expectations of being the perfect child. Although I was good at sports, they barred me from participating in extracurricular activities as they wanted me to concentrate only on studies just like my brother. It was frustrating, and I felt helpless as a child. Later in my sophomore year, I got grounded yet again, and this time, the crime? Having Snapchat on my phone. I had done absolutely nothing wrong except like all teenagers at my age I had downloaded this app to stay connected with my friends. However, according to my parents, this was a huge crime and a breach of their trust as they had forbidden me from communicating with my friends. They went batshit crazy on me and threw all my stuff around the room. They then took the doors of my hinges and told me that I would have no privacy as long as I lived under their roof. Watching my parents abuse me this way, my twin brother instead of supporting me made my life worse. The toxic environment created by our parents' unjust actions allowed him to exploit the situation to his advantage. He adopted a pattern of lying about me, falsely accusing me of things I never did so that he could get away with everything. If he stole something, he'd effortlessly shift the blame to me, and my parents, already inclined to believe the worst about me, readily accepted his lies. He would demean me in front of my friends at school and would make fun of my appearance. Despite this, I had a wide circle of friends at school because I was approachable and open to making connections. My twin, however, struggled socially, and he started to resent that I could talk to people while he, as an introvert, felt awkward. This jealousy reached a boiling point during our 14th birthday party when no one showed up for him on his birthday. I have no idea why his friends did that to him, but in stark contrast, my friends took me out for ice cream and I had an overall wonderful day. This infuriated my brother further. To take revenge, my brother began to spread false rumors at school about me where he would portray me as a spoiled brat. He would falsely tell everyone that I was allegedly physically abusing him at home since our parents loved him more. Unbeknownst to me, he took things to a disturbing level. To fabricate evidence, he would punch himself, purposefully inflicting injuries like a black eye or bruised shoulder. The next day, he would confidently walk into school, displaying the self-inflicted injuries as proof of my supposed violence and make up stories. Whenever our parents questioned him about the injuries, he would lie saying that it was due to innocent activities like playing football with his friends. The lies and his alleged black eyes started to gain traction, and people began to believe his distorted version of events. It wasn't long before whispers started circulating, and even my friends began to look at me with suspicion. At first, I noticed subtle changes. Friends who once chatted with me in the hallways suddenly became distant. Invitations to group hangouts became fewer and farther between. It was like a switch had been flipped, and people were hesitant to associate with the supposedly spoiled girl accused of violence. One day, I mustered the courage to ask my ex-best friend why things had changed between us. She opened up about how my twin brother had been spreading rumors about me. She revealed the detailed lies he had told everyone, accusing me of things I had never done. I was shocked to hear her words. The feeling was a mix of disbelief and betrayal, as if the ground beneath me had given way. My brother, someone I grew up with, was spreading lies about me, accusing me of things I would never even dream of doing. It was a betrayal that cut deep, leaving me with a knot in my stomach and a heavy heart. I confronted my brother the day after our school, but he chose to ignore me. I begged him to stop lying about me, but he smirked at me and told me that I deserved to rot alone. I was at a loss for words because his lies and behavior were starting to scare me. I wanted to talk to my parents, but I was afraid that they would believe my brother over me. The isolation stung, especially because I had always been open to making friends. It felt like my brother's jealousy-fueled lies were tearing down the connections I had built over the years. Teachers, too, began to catch wind of the rumors. It was a surreal experience, as if I were living in a parallel reality where my true self was overshadowed by the malicious stories spun by my own twin. The lies had grown beyond mere teenage gossip. They were now shaping how people truly perceived me. The nasty rumor quickly reached my principal's ears, and then my worst nightmare came true. The principal immediately called me and my brother into his room as well as our parents so we could discuss these alleged rumors. I sat there, heart pounding, as the principal demanded the truth. I hoped my brother would finally come clean, but instead, he doubled down on the lies. He straight up told the principal that, yeah, the rumors were true and painted me as this bully who went around beating him up when our parents weren't around. I couldn't believe it. Shock washed over me as my brother continued spinning this twisted story about how I was angry at him for getting more love from our parents. It was all a bunch of lies, but he stuck to his story like glue. My mom began to cry hearing my brother's story, holding on to my brother like he was some kind of hero. My dad tried to comfort my brother, telling him that it was brave for him to speak up and that he was not going to make sure that nothing would ever happen to him after that day. I tried to defend myself, pleading with the principal that it was all made up. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of accusations, desperately trying to swim to the surface. But my brother kept at it, insisting that I was this angry, violent person taking out my frustrations on him every day. My mom's tears kept coming as she held onto my brother, giving me accusing looks. It was like fighting against a wall of belief in my brother's made-up story. My principal reprimanded me strongly, saying the school didn't tolerate bullying and these were grounds to suspend me. I pleaded with him not to suspend me, but he shook his head, saying he couldn't just let it slide. I begged him, tears streaming down my face, trying to tell him that I didn't do anything to my brother. The principal firmly told me that I would be suspended for 10 days so that others see this as an example to never bully anyone. It hit me hard, and I started crying even more, practically begging him to reconsider. My parents, angry and embarrassed by the whole situation, dragged me out of the principal's office. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to plead my case, and make them understand, but they were having none of it. We left the school, my heart heavy with frustration and humiliation. When we got home, things took a drastic turn. My dad started packing up my stuff out of the blue. I was shocked, confused, and had no idea what was happening. My mom asked him what he was doing, but he just shouted that he couldn't let me live in the same house as my brother anymore. I was crying, practically on my knees, and pleaded with my brother to tell them the truth, but he stayed cold, unmoved by my emotions. My dad continued packing my things and then threw the suitcase into our foyer. I clung to my dad's legs, still begging him not to throw me out. It was like a nightmare unfolding. He told me that a bully like me didn't deserve to live in his house and that he would ask his mother, my grandmother, to come and pick me up if she wanted to do that. It felt like the world had crumbled beneath me. I stood there in shock, surrounded by my belongings scattered in the foyer, kicked out of my own home. Eventually, my grandmother did show up. She gathered all my things and helped me place them in the car. Helping me into the passenger seat, she made sure I had my seatbelt on before walking towards my parents' front door. She rang the doorbell, and when my dad opened the door, she started to yell at him for treating me this way. With stern determination, she warned him that if he ever approached me or tried to contact me again, she wouldn't hesitate to involve the police or the CPS, since what he had done to a child like me could potentially wind up with him in jail. My mother, attempting to deflect blame, told her that it was my fault. However, my grandmother wasn't having any of it. She stood her ground, defending me, emphasizing that I was just a child who didn't deserve to be treated in such a heartless manner. That was the first time in my life I felt how powerful my grandmother was. She didn't cower down to my parents, and unlike what they believed, she trusted me. Eventually, we drove away, leaving behind my home, the only place I had ever grown up in. I can't even begin to put into words how indescribable the pain I felt during that time. I remember just crying on the bed and not eating anything despite how much my grandmother urged me to. I told her what my brother had done, and she was shocked as well. She assured me that she believed my side of the story, and I was happy that I at least had one person who had my back. When the 10 days of suspension lifted, the prospect of returning to school felt like stepping back into a lion's den. As I entered the familiar hallways, the faces of my classmates spoke volumes: judgment, whispers, and sidelong glances. The weight of the false accusations continued to linger in the air. Meanwhile, my brother blatantly ignored me and acted like I didn't exist. He had become friends with a few people who believed his side of the story and saw him as the victim of my attacks. No matter how much I tried to tell my side of the story to anyone, it fell on deaf ears. I was an outcast, branded with an unjust label that clung to me like a shadow. No matter where I went, the classroom, the cafeteria, the corridors, the eyes that met mine were filled with disdain and mistrust. I became a loner. I would keep my head down and attend all my classes, have lunch alone in the cafeteria, and would straight go back home. I had no friends, and it felt like everyone pretty much didn't want me there. Throughout all this, my parents never once called to check up on me. My grandmother would constantly remind me that this was not my fault and that life would eventually be okay. I graduated high school with good grades and was looking forward to college, where hopefully I would have a better life. It was only when I went away to college that I first experienced what freedom felt like for the first time. No one was watching over my shoulders, no one was comparing my grades, and no one was trying to compete with me. I met people and formed friendships with like-minded individuals. Despite the emotional and physical scars I had sustained over the years due to my family and peers, I concentrated on putting it all behind me and enjoying this college experience as much as I could. During this time, I discovered my knack for content writing. I had always been someone who wanted to be a writer, but I wasn't sure if it would be sustainable for a long time, hence I decided to ditch my dream. But to earn some side money, I decided to start writing as a freelancer. I signed up on various freelancing sites which helped me secure jobs from prominent clients. This is how I slowly started building a portfolio of my work. Throughout college, I maintained this side hustle and never asked for a penny from my parents. When I graduated from college, instead of getting a corporate job, I realized that I could pursue content writing as a full-time job. I was doing quite well because of the multiple clients and the long-term professional relationships I had with them, which allowed them to rope me in multiple projects of theirs. Having a legitimate freelancing career not only made me financially independent, but also allowed me to travel the world as a digital nomad. Traveling helped heal me from my past. Even though it was definitely not easy, I saved up as much as I could and took a chance on myself. Over the years, I have seen so much of the world, and yet I have so much of it left to see. The only person who I considered my family throughout all this was my grandmother, and I absolutely adored her. She was very sad when I moved out, but she understood that I needed to be independent on my own. Despite my hectic schedule, I would make it a point to be there for her whenever I could. I would visit her on the weekends, often sharing meals together or simply sitting on the porch, engrossed in conversations that ranged from childhood tales to more recent happenings. On weekends, I would dedicate entire afternoons to helping her with household chores or accompanying her to the local park for a leisurely walk. Recently, I got done with one of the most important projects of my career. I can't mention the brand, but I was extremely lucky to write blogs and product descriptions for them. After the project was done, I requested the team I worked with to leave me positive reviews on my websites, which they were more than happy to do so. I then took screenshots of some of their reviews to post on my Instagram, as I knew working with this brand was a huge deal. As expected, a lot of other content writers reached out to congratulate me on my professional success and even reposted my story to help spread the word. This is how I started getting messages from strangers who also needed help with their website. My relatives noticed this as well, and some of them reached out to congratulate me. Eventually, I was contacted by my college's principal. He had reached out to me after seeing that I was doing so well and wanted me to come to college for a seminar to talk to students about building a career as a content writer. I was quite nervous as I don't do well when it comes to public speaking, but I decided to take a chance and agreed. When I found myself standing before eager faces, sharing my experiences and insights, I felt like my life had come full circle. I spoke in my speech about the struggles I faced and how I worked hard to sustain myself despite all the hard days. It was honestly a very fulfilling experience to empower others and contribute to the growth of the writers community. Some of my clips started going viral on Facebook groups as people reasoned with it. It felt good to be finally recognized for my hard work. Last week, I was invited to speak at a local news channel. It was a show about the benefits of content writing, and they invited me to share my journey and insights with their viewers. I was a bit nervous but also excited for the opportunity. During the show, I talked about my experiences, the importance of client reviews, and how a simple appreciation post could open doors to incredible opportunities. The opportunity to reach a broader audience and inspire more individuals in the field was both humbling and exhilarating. When it finally aired, I shared some of these clips on my Instagram also, as I was proud about being invited to a TV show. This is how my relatives and cousins started finding out how well I was doing in my career. You see, because my parents never talked about me to anyone, they had no idea that I was working with popular brands and getting invited to TV shows. This is how word quickly spread within my family. I guess this TV interview must have finally reached my parents' ears also, because just a few days later, I was working on another project and had my phone on silent. When I was done with my work, I checked my phone, and to my surprise, there were 6 missed calls from my mom. I was honestly shocked to see her name on my phone, as it had been a long time since she had called me. After all those years of silence, I couldn't fathom why she was calling me. I hesitatingly called her back and she picked up immediately. I asked her if everything was okay, and my mom started to congratulate me. My dad, probably sitting right there with mom, jumped into the conversation also. He started to inquire about my life and well-being, and I answered their questions without much thought. It didn't strike me as unusual until they began to ask how much I was earning these days. I told them that it was none of their business, and my dad replied that we were family, so I shouldn't feel shy telling them my income. I told him that I was doing well financially. Hearing this, my mom then began to say how hard their life was these days. My brows furrowed in suspicion. Basically, here is how our conversation pretty much went. Mom, we are retired now and we have been wanting to renovate the house for a while now. It's not in the best shape, but we have no savings left. Me, okay mom, your success has given us hope. After watching your TV interview today, we thought maybe you could help us out by paying for the renovations. Dad, after all, we are a family. You shouldn't hesitate to share some of your earnings with us. We can really use your help. Me, are you joking with me? Why are you asking me for money when you haven't even talked to me for years? I don't know what made you decide to reach out to me, and while I appreciate the congratulations, I am not going to help you out in any way. Hearing this, my mom started saying how I was being a bitch and that I needed to support them as a family. My dad also added that as my parents, they deserve to be looked out after and that this was the least that we could do. I was so pissed at this that I wanted to give them a piece of my mind. I suddenly got an idea that instead of just arguing with them, I should teach them a lesson forever, thinking that they could mooch off me after mistreating me all those years ago. I told my parents that I was willing to help them if and only if they agreed to my demands. My dad curiously asked me what it was. Without hesitation, I laid out my demand. If they wanted my help, they had to publicly admit, in front of our family and friends, that my brother was the mastermind behind the hurtful rumors that had tarnished my reputation. I wanted them to humiliate my brother the same way they had humiliated me in front of everyone by believing his lies and manipulations. I wanted them to take accountability for their actions and acknowledge the pain they had caused. Hearing my impossible condition, my dad began to question the necessity of such an admission. My mom told me how this was all quite unnecessary and that we could have a private discussion without involving others, but I held my ground. This condition was non-negotiable, a prerequisite for any assistance they wanted me to offer them in the future. As the tension escalated, my dad raised his voice, asserting his role as my father, and started to emphasize that it was my duty to help my family in need. My mom, in a last-ditch effort, urged me to do the right thing and help them, emphasizing the years they had spent raising me. I couldn't help but find irony in their sudden appeal. I reminded them of the past, of the fact that they had kicked me out and it was my grandmother who had raised me, not them. They started to get more and more agitated, but I told them firmly that if they wanted to establish contact with me and seek my financial assistance from now on, then the truth needed to be acknowledged publicly and my brother needed to face consequences for his actions. Since this conversation, my parents have been trying to incessantly call me, but I am ignoring their calls. I am starting to regret even calling them back that day. I would like to know if I would really be in a hole if I didn't help my parents at all. Update 1. It's been a whirlwind of a week since I last shared my story, and the support and encouragement I have been receiving from everyone has been overwhelming. It's heartening to know that I'm not alone during this time. I am glad that everyone agrees that I should not engage with my parents or even consider helping them out after what they put me through. The reason I even gave them such a condition was because I knew it was pretty much impossible for them to do it. I know they love my brother too much, and despite the fact that they might have found out by now that it was all his lies, I know they will never put him through what they put me through. Today, my brother sent me a nasty text message after my parents again tried to contact me and I refused to pick up their calls. This is what he wrote. "Hey sis, it's been a long time since I saw you and I can tell you that every day without you in my life has been great. I heard that mom and dad reached out to you and you gave them a crazy ultimatum. They are never going to go through with it, you know that, right? They clearly never loved you and they will never do anything to hurt me. I admit that I did lie about you 15 years ago, but it's been a long time since then. So stop being so selfish and try to move on from the past. You are unmarried and childless anyway, so why do you not want to help them out by paying for their repairs and renovations around the house? Do the right thing and be a better daughter." Seeing the message felt like a stab to my chest. The audacity to dismiss the struggles I had faced and the conditions I had set spoke volumes about his lack of empathy. The attempt to guilt trip me by emphasizing my unmarried and childless status added another layer of insensitivity. His insinuation that I should prioritize their needs over my own well-being was not only offensive but also highlighted how little he thought of me. Fueled by frustration and a strong desire for justice, I decided it was time to take matters into my own hands and reveal the truth that had been hidden for too long. I sat down to write an email to my parents and close relatives, sharing the painful details of my childhood and the unfair treatment I had endured while growing up at my family house. In the email, I described the strict and oppressive environment I had under my parents' roof and how they treated me compared to my twin brother. The email also delved into the malicious and completely untrue rumor my brother had spread about me in school, which had led to severe consequences and affected my reputation. I wrote how my parents had kicked me out to the curb and had it not been my grandmother I might have been dead in the streets by now. Towards the end, I asked everyone to read a message my brother had sent me. I attached a screenshot where he admitted to lying about me. It was a clear confession that I hoped would expose the lies that had persisted for too long. I sent the email just an hour ago and I know that all hell will break loose once my parents and my brother read it. I will update you next regarding how my family reacts to my email. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update and a lot of things have happened this month. As you can imagine, my family did erupt after receiving the email. My parents have received criticism from relatives, who were previously unaware of the extent of the favoritism and emotional abuse. A lot of the family members reached out to me telling me that they had no idea about all this and apologized to me for not being there for me. My brother and my parents sent me a barrage of text messages that were starting to get more abusive and violent, so I decided to reach out to a lawyer who sent them a notice of cease and desist. It basically warned them to not contact me further, and if they did, they would have to face dire legal consequences. I guess this must have scared them straight because they stopped contacting me. My grandmother thinks I have done the right thing by letting everyone know what happened and supports me 100%. She is the only person who matters to me, so I am glad she has my back. Update 3. It's been 2 months since my last update. I am happy to report that everything in my life is going well for now. Professionally, my content writing business has been flourishing. The invitations to speak at seminars and podcasts continue to roll in, solidifying my position as a respected figure in my line of work. I am as close to my grandmother as ever. I took a 1-week break from my work recently so I could spend some quality time with her. She is into gardening these days and educated me a lot about various flowers and herbs in her garden. The moments I spent with her, whether sharing meals, engaging in heartfelt conversations, or simply enjoying each other's company, are my favorite and cherished memories. My family has not contacted me after the letter they received from my lawyer, so I am happy that they are staying away from me. Personally, I have started going to therapy, so hopefully I can work on healing myself. I think this will be the last update for now. My ex-wife cheated on me with my golden child brother and gave birth to his baby. Now, my family, which always hated me, begs for money after I get promoted. I, 29M, got divorced from my wife, 27F, 2 months ago. She'd been cheating on me with my estranged brother, 27M, for a while, and 4 months ago, I finally found out when she told me that she was pregnant. Initially, she tried to convince me that the baby was ours, but my brother's frequent visits made me question everything, so I decided to check her phone. I confronted her about whatever texts I found, and she ended up confessing that she'd been cheating on me with my brother since she pretty much had no other option anymore. My family and I hadn't been on talking terms ever since I left home when I turned 18. They'd always treated me like an outsider even in my own family, and my brother was the golden child. I thought that it was a little weird to start the party meant for me without me, but then, I saw the cake and completely lost it. I finally confronted my parents and asked them why they hadn't thrown me a party for an actual, real achievement instead, and they told me that after my acceptance letter, they didn't want my brother to feel left out, so they threw him a party instead. And instead of throwing a tantrum, I should be trying to uplift my brother as well. That just completely broke me, and that very day, I made up my mind to never come back to them ever again. And I stuck to it. I paid my way through college by taking out a loan and working, and then rented a tiny apartment with a friend after I was done with college. I never spoke to my parents after I moved out for college, and neither did they try to get through to me either. Of course, ages have passed since then, and last year, my brother reached out to me online to ask if I wanted to reconnect with him and my parents since they really seemed to miss me. A lot had happened since I'd left home. Like 2 years ago, I'd gotten married to my ex-wife. I was leading a very comfortable life, but I don't think I'd ever moved on from whatever had happened with my parents, so I did end up agreeing to meet them. It was awkward and felt uncomfortable initially, but they were making an effort to fix whatever they'd done to me in the past, so I felt obliged to make an effort for them as well. So I invited them to my home as well, and I guess that was my first mistake, introducing my brother to my ex. They met, they started an affair, and she got pregnant. I was really happy when I found out that she was pregnant, since I'd obviously thought that the baby was mine. But then, like I'd mentioned earlier, my brother started visiting more often after I found out about the pregnancy, and while initially it didn't bother me, it started getting weird when he would touch my wife's pregnant stomach and speak into it. My ex told me that it wasn't that big of a deal, but I just couldn't shake off a sneaking suspicion that my brother had more to do with the baby than he was letting on. 6 months into the pregnancy, I decided to go through her phone while she was asleep, and it confirmed everything that I was terrified of. The texts between my ex and my brother proved that it was actually his baby, and they'd been together for a while now. Not only that, my ex had no intention of ever letting me know that the baby wasn't even mine. She and my brother planned on telling me about the affair after the baby was born, and then, she'd get a divorce from me and finally get with my brother while they'd live off the fortune with the child support that I'll be paying. The next morning, I asked her about the texts, and while she did try to deny it at first, she eventually gave up and confessed. That was the end of my marriage of 2 years, and well, of course, my parents sided with my brother and my ex. All their words about the two of us being equally important to them were just words after all. When my ex and my brother announced our divorce on social media and her decision to marry him, my entire family was fully supportive of their decision. Nobody cared that they'd ruined my mental health and broken my trust. Not just that, my ex had been lying to me for 6 months and telling me that the baby was mine. It felt as though I'd not just lost my wife but also my kid, and it just hurt so much. My parents told me that this was for the best and once again, refused to even act like my brother had wronged me. They, in fact, told me that I should be happy that my ex and brother had finally found happiness and should join the celebrations. Once again, I cut them out of my life, and that messed up my divorce as well. My ex-wife walked away with a huge settlement sum in my car, all because my family was on my wife's side in the divorce because she was with my brother now. She and her lawyer cooked up some story about how I was toxic and controlling and forced her to quit her job even though it was her own choice, and my family reinforced it by saying that the reason they'd cut me off in the first place was because of my misogynistic attitude and temper tantrums. So the evidence was stacked against me, and I lost a lot of money in the divorce, but thankfully, I got to keep the house. When the divorce was finalized, I was just glad that I was done with this crap now and wouldn't have to see any of these god-awful people ever again. Luckily, there's no waiting period for a divorce where I live, and my ex-wife didn't contest it either, so I was able to wrap it all up as quickly as possible so that I could move on with my life. It was difficult to forget about all of this, but I drowned myself in work and pushed myself to be better so that I could move on from this nasty episode as fast as I could. That paid off, since 2 weeks ago, I got a promotion. Better position, better salary, and better company car, the works basically. And I couldn't have been happier about it, so I decided to treat myself to a solo dinner date at one of my favorite restaurants. But I made the mistake of posting about it online, and within a day or two, my mother contacted me and asked me to come visit them. I was baffled as to what they could possibly want from me now, since we hadn't even spoken after the divorce was finalized and they'd supported my ex and her lies. I managed to ignore it for a few days, but then she started calling me relentlessly, and eventually, when nothing else worked, she showed up to my office. She simply refused to leave and got into a fight with the receptionist, which was pretty embarrassing, so I promised that I'd visit in a few days, which was how I was finally able to convince her to leave. A couple of days after that, I finally visited my family. They'd used the settlement amount to move into a bigger house so they could accommodate the baby as well, who'd been born just a little over 3 weeks ago. I guess that the alimony was also being used to pay the bills, but truth be told, it didn't really affect me that much since the alimony was a really small part of my salary at this point and I could afford it. My brother wasn't home and my ex was asleep, so it was just my parents who spoke to me. I didn't try to make any small talk and simply waited for them to get to the point, so after around 5 minutes of silence, my father blurted out that my brother had been fired from his job and the alimony and settlement just weren't cutting it anymore. They said that they'd seen the post about my promotion and were hoping that I could help them out since they were running low on money now. My parents retired a long time ago, my brother was out of a job, and my ex obviously wasn't going back to work anytime soon. The alimony wasn't enough to pay the bills for a family of 5, especially with a newborn in the house, and I knew that, too. However, I was shocked that they'd even had the audacity to approach me for it after everything that had happened. I was so shocked that I didn't even have anything to say for a good few minutes. But finally, I came to my senses and decided that I didn't need to entertain any of this. I simply got up and left without a word. When I reached the door and opened it, I found my brother standing outside. My parents were telling me to stay back and hear them out, and my brother looked a little alarmed to see me there. I still didn't say anything and proceeded to leave. It was raining pretty heavily and it was a short walk to where I'd parked my car outside their lawn, so I got completely drenched and I was already in a horrible mood. Now this is where I might have been the because my parents and brother came after me, and while I was looking for my keys in my pocket, they decided to ask me for help one last time. And this time, it was my brother who was making the plea. He's always been smug and arrogant, a direct result of the way our parents treated us, so it was weird to see him asking me for help, and it must have taken a lot of trouble to convince him, so they were definitely being honest about the bad phase. Anyway, I sort of lost my cool and ended up telling them to leave me alone and that they could beg on the streets if they were really that hard pressed for cash, since a stranger who knew nothing about them was probably more likely to take pity on their condition than I was. Having said that, I got in my car and drove away, leaving them in the rain. I'm not going to lie, it was pretty satisfying to do that to my family since they'd done nothing but mistreat me my whole life. It's been 2 days since that happened, and, well, I'm not sure if I'm right anymore. My mother has been texting me nonstop and I feel so guilty for not helping them out. I know I have a lot and sending them a little money won't actually hurt me, but after everything that's happened, it just feels like I'm being used, quite frankly. So Ida for not helping my family out with money after they took my ex's side in the divorce? Update 1. So, I decided not to help them out. It was a pretty big deal for me since I felt awfully guilty about how I was just going to abandon them, but then I realized that, well, they'd been doing that to me my entire life. And even in the divorce, they'd been the ones who had thrown me under the bus, so why should I think twice before doing the same to them? I told my mother to stop pestering me or else I'd be forced to get my lawyers involved, and that wouldn't end well for them. Now that naturally irked them, and so, my brother showed up to my house a few days ago to talk to me. He told me that while he felt sorry for how I'd been treated my entire childhood, he couldn't help the fact that he just was inherently better than me, which is why he was also treated like that. And he also told me that I should stop being so weird with our parents for doing what any other normal parent would have done in their place and just help them out since they're in a tough spot instead of holding grudges like a child. I laughed in his face because of how absolutely demented he sounded, talking crap like that. I told him that instead of trying to put me down and manipulate me into helping them out, he should probably be out looking for a job and not wasting his time like this. That touched a nerve, I think, and he started yelling at me about how I was just jealous of the fact that not just our parents but even my ex-wife preferred him over me, and I was taking revenge by refusing to give my family money. I didn't even bother to fight back and just agreed with him, saying that all that I was doing was just to get revenge on him and there wasn't much that he could do about it. So he got super pissed off and told me that he was going to come after me and force me to cough up the money one way or another, and I'd regret ever speaking to him that way. Honestly, I'm not taking any of that seriously in the least. He can try to scare me all he wants, but it's just not going to work because I know he's not capable of doing anything at all to me. I'm unbothered. Update 2. Well, 3 days ago, my brother visited me and tried to convince me to help them, but he was unsuccessful. My parents have already tried in the past and it didn't work out for them, either. So this time, my ex decided to call me up and speak to me. I was skeptical about answering, but then I decided to answer anyway because if I didn't then they'd probably visit again and waste some more of my time. So I spoke to her, and it was insane how entitled and cruel these people can be. She started very politely and told me that, like I already knew, she and her family were struggling with money, and while she realized that I had absolutely no need to help them after whatever they'd put me through, she still wanted me to think about it and be the bigger person here. She tried to make me sympathetic by reminding me that my parents had paid for everything growing up and even she had done her best to be a good wife. Like, yeah, sure, except for the part where my parents didn't give a damn about me and always preferred my brother, and she actually ended up cheating on me with the same brother I used to complain about. So yeah, that didn't work at all, and I told her that while I felt awful about what was happening to them, I was already spending a lot of unnecessary money by paying her alimony, which she technically didn't even deserve since she'd cheated on me but managed to get it out of me since my family had no qualms about lying and making me the bad guy for their gain. She started sobbing on call and told me that I was being selfish and heartless, which was just ironic. When I still refused to help, she told me that my brother was right and that I'd left her with no choice but to get the law involved, and said that she was going to demand a higher alimony now and drag me to court to humiliate me once again. Honestly, I'd like to see them try. The first time around, I was so emotionally drained and depressed that I didn't even bother fighting back or trying to prove them wrong. I just gave in and agreed to pay the alimony without even attempting to prove their claims as false. I never was toxic or controlling or any of those things that they claimed, so she had no reason to cheat on me and so didn't deserve a single dollar out of the divorce. But whatever, I didn't care then and just wanted to get the divorce over with, no matter the financial impact of it. This time, though, I'm ready to fight and make sure that I teach my family the lesson of a lifetime. Update 3. In a shocking turn of events, my wife was true to her words for the first time and actually filed for a higher amount as alimony given that I'd been promoted. But this time, I wasn't going to let things slide so easily. I got all our common friends involved and told them whatever was happening and even filled them in on past events, since most of them only knew that we'd separated and didn't even know about the real reason. They were all obviously very shocked, and I told them that I needed them to testify against my wife if it came down to it, and they agreed readily. I also told my lawyer that I wanted to discontinue the whole alimony arrangement altogether since she didn't deserve it in the least. I spent the past few days gathering all the evidence I could find of my parents and brother being horrible people who never bothered to treat me like an equal and are now hounding me for money just because they know about my promotion. I'd had enough and I needed to get rid of these disgusting parasites once and for all, so I wasn't going to stop and think about their feelings at all. I managed to convince some of my cousins who'd watched me get treated like an outsider in my own home while growing up to speak on my behalf, and they were kind enough to do so as well, even though we were never particularly close or anything. My lawyer was pretty pleased with whatever we'd managed to gather and told me that this would be airtight and we might actually be able to stop paying alimony. It was already known that she'd cheated on me, but the reasons given by my ex, painting me as the villain and my brother as the hero who rescued her, were all lies, and even though I hadn't tried to fight back the last time, I was certainly going to set the record straight this time. And I did so, too. My family had literally nothing to say for themselves when I brought up several video testimonials that my friends and a couple of relatives had recorded in my favor to prove that everything that my family had said was a lie and that I wasn't the kind of person that they'd made me out to be. I guess that they'd figured they'd be let off the hook this time just as easily as the last time, but I wasn't that emotionally fragile anymore, and honestly, whatever they'd put me through had made me a lot stronger. So yesterday, it was finalized that I won't have to pay my ex any alimony anymore in light of whatever new information had surfaced, and I was probably the happiest man on earth when I realized that it was over. It was just so satisfying to see the smug look completely wiped off of my family's face. And my ex looked like she was going to start crying any second now. But yeah, I couldn't care less about her crying anymore and was just simply done with this whole thing. I'd thought that I'd go home and treat myself to some great takeout and a movie, but my family, obviously, absolutely had to do any and everything in their power to stop me from experiencing happiness. I was only a few yards away from my house when I noticed my brother's car parked right outside my home, and I was really confused as to why he'd be there. I still went in and there was my family, standing outside my door and blocking my way in. I was very taken aback and didn't even know what to say, but I decided to act like this didn't bother me and told them to get off my property if they didn't want me to call the police. That's when my dad spoke up and told me that I should be ashamed of myself for what I'd done today. He went on to lecture me about how I had no sense of responsibility towards my family and had betrayed them all by refusing to help them out when they needed it the most. After he was done, I simply refused to answer or engage in any sort of conversation with him and stood there silently. I just didn't want to give them the satisfaction of getting a rise out of me, because I'm guessing that's what the goal was, to get me so emotional that eventually I'd give up and do something rash and stupid. But I'm not an idiot, and their desperate measures weren't going to help their case at all, which they should have realized by then. My silence probably pissed them off even more, and even though my mother demanded that I treat my dad with respect and talk to him, I still refused to speak. I could see them getting agitated because they'd clearly hoped for a huge fight, but nothing of the sort was happening. After some more yelling, my brother finally snapped and grabbed me by the collar. He then proceeded to try and hit me, but my dad managed to pull him back just in time while he yelled about how I was nothing but just a jealous loser who would never amount to anything. I mean, it was really funny, coming from an unemployed guy still living with his parents and begging his brother for money to live on, but okay. I told them that they needed to leave or else I'd actually call the cops, and seeing how they're broke, they should probably make a run for it within the next 5 minutes. Begrudgingly, they went away, but not before one last-ditch attempt by my mother to shame me into coughing up some money. It still didn't work, and eventually, they left. It's been almost a day since that, and they haven't tried to contact me since, and I'm truly hoping that it stays this way now. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Found out wife cheated on me with my stepdaughter's father, so I divorced her immediately. My 33M wife, 33F, cheated on me in December. I walked in on them at his house as I knew what was going on. It was my stepdaughter's father. I have been kicking him off our property for years and keeping his anger in check. I spent all day taking care of the house, the pets, the yard, and her daughter, 4F. When we got married, she had me donate my beater so I could drive one of her cars. I even did a little part-time work on the side at the law firm she works at. My days began at 6 a.m. and ended as late as 2 a.m. some nights because of all the chores I was responsible for. I tried to forgive her but continued catching her talking to him and even making plans to sleep with other male friends, all the while assuring me she wanted us to work. She abused me sexually and emotionally, telling me that cheating was my fault because I should have done something to stop it, and using guilt and threats to make me have sex with her when I was clear I wasn't ready for that. She got pregnant after I caught her with him, and I asked for a DNA test. Instead, she went and got an abortion immediately and blamed me for that, too. I decided to leave last month and quit my job. Since then, my family has been supporting me, and I struggle every day to get out of bed and even just feed myself. We were married less than a year. I am getting no spousal support, no car, had to leave my job, lost half of my family, her family, my stepdaughter, I have no home, and was left with no money. If it wasn't for my family helping me, I would be completely homeless. My mental health is in a bad place, as I have found out that cheating was happening even when we were just dating. It was all fake or some kind of game for her, and I'm left to pick up the pieces. I was cheated on and abused, and I am the only one being punished. I'm told there's little I can do by my lawyer, whom I trust a great deal. He is a trusted family friend. What do I do with all this emotion? How do I fix myself? I know I need to take baby steps, get another job, etc., but leaving the house feels like an insurmountable task right now. I'm struggling with severe depression and anxiety in public. Even being with my friends is extremely taxing and leaves me a sobbing mess when I finally can drive home. I feel broken and nothing is getting better, and I don't know what to do. Update 1. Ex-wife bringing AP to our divorce hearing. Title says it all. A friend informed me that my ex-wife will be bringing the AP to the divorce hearing as a final jab at me. How should I deal with this? Several friends have offered to come as support, but some have said I should just do my best to ignore them. What would you do? Update 2. My divorce hearing was finally today. My post history contains my full story, but I was abused by my ex-wife after catching her in our bed with another man days after Christmas last year. I tried but as time went on, I kept catching her talking to the same guy and even planning to go see others out of town while getting inappropriate sexual Snapchats and texts from them. All while lying to my face and telling me she has cut contact. Every single time. Same story. I finally told her I was leaving and would be filing for divorce, and she told me again that if I left she would kill me. Here we are, though. I am alive and she is permanently out of my life. I came home from the courthouse and hit a few new maxes in the gym, and I'm all around feeling great. She doesn't know where I live, moved out of town, and she doesn't know where my new job is. This woman, who I love dearly and would have done anything for, took everything from me. My job, my car, my home, my stepdaughter, my marriage, my mental health, and potentially my baby. Even though I am confident it was AP's baby, she aborted it when I asked for a DNA test. This entire year has been an unending hell for me, and all the while she blamed me for leaving and tearing apart our family. By the time she arrived this morning, I was already speaking to my lawyer. We just had to be present and get the papers signed by the judge. I never looked at her once, not even when she tried to hand me mail from the house. I just grabbed it and kept walking. I did notice that AP didn't come with her, odd since she had been saying to mutual friends he would be coming with. Everything proceeds fine. I was stressed and emotional on the inside, but I kept a gentle smile on my face and kept my spirits high. She was sounding like she was about to cry, but I never looked. It was until I got home that I noticed a note mixed in with my mail. AP wasn't there because he got some other girl he was seeing pregnant. I tore it up and threw it away. She had a loving husband and she cheated, lied, and hurt me till I left her, and she did it for a loser that was seeing other girls anyway. The cherry on top is that AP hates being a father. He is lazy, beat my ex-wife when they were together, and drops his daughter off with his mother anytime he has her. She called him by his first name and called me dad because she barely knew the guy. His own mother cried on Christmas while we shared a drink because she was so happy her granddaughter had me in her life. This new baby will destroy his life even further. My only hope is that whomever he is having this baby with gets away from him ASAP for the baby's sake. Despite how high energy I am, I feel very alone today and am bouncing between very happy and very muted. Sorry if this is all over the place, I'm just feeling very strange. I thought it would feel better, but if I'm being honest, I wish none of us were suffering. This story has already been uploaded to my channel months ago, but recently there have been new updates that might interest you. I will leave the timestamp in the description for you to skip the old bits. My entitled sisters demanded that I let them rent out my vacation home for profit. When I refused, their husbands broke in and are now facing charges. Happened today. My folks decided to host a barbecue because I guess that's what older people do. I declined because I really don't like my two sisters, their husbands or their kids. Wife and I are child-free. Mom then pressured the wife. Long story short, we went. By the time we arrived there were about 20 people there. My sisters and their husbands were already solidly buzzed. Drunk really. My mom was spending 100% of her time trying to keep the nieces and nephews, ages 7 to 11, more or less under control. My dad had strategically retreated to the whirlpool part of the pool with small cooler full of beers. Wife and I made small talk with miscellaneous people, ate food and had a frozen margarita. Sisters/Bills took turns criticizing us for being late, not being in our swimsuits and screwing up the vibe. Whatever. Typical suburban summer get-together. About 45 minutes in, two of the kids ran at one of the neighbor guests who was standing next to the pool and pushed her in. She was at the pool steps, stumbled in but didn't fall, so only got half wet. She was clearly very unhappy about it, but she didn't make a scene, just went over to where the parents were, grabbed their towels, dried herself off and left. Sisters and Bills thought it was all great fun. A bit later I was standing a few feet away from the pool chatting away with someone. I saw 3 of the kids running full tilt at me from the corner of my eye. Obviously I was next. Not that it's terribly difficult to outwit young kids, but I just jumped out of their way at the last second. All 3 of them ran straight into the pool at full speed. Most of the other guests, including my wife and me, started laughing, but their moms, who as I mentioned were pretty shit-faced, absolutely freaked out. Apparently 2 of the kids couldn't swim even though they were in swimsuits. Since I wasn't in swim gear, I stepped back from the pool and let other people fish the kids out. The kids were bawling their heads off like they'd lost a limb. At that point all hell broke loose. The 4 drunk parents were yelling at everyone in general and me in particular for nearly letting their kids drown, and also because 2 of the kids had been videoing the trick using their parents' iPhones, which were now at the bottom of the pool. One of my Bills got into the pool to try to retrieve the phones, but his BMI and BAC made that impossible. No one else volunteered to help, unsurprising given that my sisters were still bitching at everyone. I told my sisters it was their job to watch their kids and that if anything had happened to them it would have been their responsibility, not mine. There were some pretty strong words on both sides. Wife and I left after the other Bill fell over and face planted while yelling at us. Now they're saying I should have let the little shits knock me into the pool and have their fun, and ruin my phone. So, Ida? Side note, Dad, of course, never got out of the whirlpool. Relevant comments. Thoughts from Oop. I realize they're just kids and they were just having fun. The fact that they thought this was okay is more of a reflection on their parents than them. Just wish we hadn't gone. It's nice to see my folks and their neighbors, but I really don't like my sisters or their husbands. They don't hide their envy of us and they're just exhausting to be around. More about why Oop doesn't care for some of his family. It's more of an oil and water sort of thing. I've never been close to my sisters, they're 8 and 10 years older than me. I also don't have much in common with their husbands. They're okay guys, but I just don't give a crap about the things that are important to them and vice versa. I do know that the 4 of them are somewhat envious of our lifestyle. Both the sisters are stay-at-home moms. Both the husbands make good money, one makes noticeably more than I do, but both my wife and I have professional careers, we don't have kids and we're way more responsible with money. As a result we have a lot more investments, etc., and we don't have to drive cars full of kid debris and we take nice trips once or twice a year. It definitely grates on both sisters and by extension their husbands. So we get some petty behavior from them on an ongoing basis. Overall neither my wife nor I enjoy their company, which is why I wanted to skip the get-together. Just not worth it to me. But my wife is a positive person and is usually happy to see them. Hopefully next time your wife won't feel guilted into going. That's probably the one positive thing that will come out of this. Wife is much more tolerant and forgiving than I am towards my siblings, but based on what she was saying on the way home I think she's had it with them as well. Your dad sounds awesome. Yeah, my dad's very chill. He loves being around groups of people, used to be in sales, likes people to enjoy themselves and is definitely enjoying life as a retiree. He and 2 other guys with him just sat there and watched the show. Mom's cool too, but the situation upset her. Kids okay? The kids are fine, by the time I left they were inside watching TV. I think they're 7, 9, 10, and 11. It was the middle 3 who played kamikaze with me. I'm guessing the 11-year-old egged them on, she's usually the ringleader. You phrased the part about your parents hosting a barbecue oddly. I had to shorten the post to fit in the character limit. My folks are gregarious and like to have people over. They have the classic great for entertaining house and are always coming up with a reason to get together. They'd wanted everyone to be at their place for the 4th of July, but one of my sisters and her family were on a vacation. So this was a fake 4th of July party complete with flags, red, white and blue decorations, barbecue, a margarita machine, etc. Sparklers were promised to the kids. My nieces and nephews were the only kids there. All of the neighbors are older like my parents. Oop is voted not the a-hole. Update post, August 17, 2023, almost 1 month later. First off, my folks tell me that my nieces and nephews are all good swimmers and that they use the pool all the time. The 7-year-old is still a beginner, but he loves the water. My sister just said they couldn't swim, so I'd look bad. To be fair, none of the kids are allowed in the deep end, which is where they fell in. It was the 2 10-year-olds and the 9-year-old who tried to push me into the pool. After we left, the party ended on a pretty sour note. My drunk brother-in-law, who face planted while yelling at me, had to go to an urgent care place and get his face stitched up. He was too toasted to drive, so Dad took him. Dad was very not happy about this. Late that evening, my sisters started a group text and said some really nasty crap. Their husbands threw in a few comments as well. Wife and I blocked the 4 of them. My mom called me. She was pretty upset about what they said. She and Dad were in the chat, and I don't blame her. Because of the texts, my folks insisted my sisters, Bills, come over the next day, Sunday, without their kids to get some things straight and lay down some ground rules, Mom's wording. The result was a contrite if unenthusiastic apology from the siblings via my mom's phone. I'm glad my wife was with me when they called. Her hard stares kept me from saying what I wanted to. I just told them, thanks, and that we felt no need to discuss it further. Since I thought things were settled, I unblocked them. That evening I got a text from one of the Bills telling me the phones cost $4x and asking when I'd be paying for them. WTF? I replied never, took a screenshot of his text and forwarded it to my folks with a note that we were done with this nonsense. We're going no contact with sisters, spouses, and not to invite us to any more holidays or get-togethers if they'll be present. Then I blocked the sisters and their spouses again. At that point the shit really hit the fan. Dad called them and ripped them a new one. Among other things, he told them the grandkids were not welcome at his place indefinitely. Since my mom regularly provides free babysitting, that got them pretty rattled. He also banned them from using the vacation house and told them my wife and I actually own it, not he and Mom. This completely freaked them out. Both of my sisters' families use the place a lot, including having their friends up for weekend getaways. This was very much out of character for my folks. They'd clearly had it. And for reference, I never wanted my sisters to know we own the place. We bought it for my folks. They'd always wanted a place in the mountains. Keeping the ownership quiet was just a way to avoid drama with my siblings. A couple of days later, my sisters and their husbands came to our place unannounced to apologize in person. We were out to dinner and they left a note. One sister also called me at work too. I sent her to voicemail. We've decided being no contact is the best thing for the indefinite future and haven't interacted with them for the last 3+ weeks. Personally, I'm done. They can go pound sand. Relevant comments. How life has been. It's been less than a month, but I have to say that blocking them has actually made our lives noticeably more peaceful. I hadn't realized how much ongoing low-level drama they create. It's not toxic, they're not bad people, they're just tiresome and petty. And I personally don't care about them using the weekend place. It's ours technically, but we bought it for my folks. They control it and decide who uses it when they aren't. We pay for all the operating costs and taxes. One good thing about this blow up is that we now know what we'll be doing with the property when my folks get older. I was prepared to take over managing it, allocating weekends, maintaining it and such, but now we know we'll just sell it, and if we want to go to the mountains we'll just rent an Airbnb. Oops, parents. Yeah, my folks aren't dumb. They're pretty laid back though, very much live and let live. I figure they'll ease up on all of this soon, but that's their decision. We still won't be attending any family events for the foreseeable future. What sucks for my sisters is that they're probably very worried that I'll keep them from using the cabin. I won't. That's up to Mom and Dad until they are older. And it puts an end to one of the sisters' fantasy of building a compound of houses when we inherit the property, which I've known about for some time and had just ignored. Normally the lots up there only have one area that can be built on, but this piece of property is way larger because it's at the end of a road. At least 3 houses with great views could be placed on that land. They're not genuinely sorry, they just want things from you. I agree completely, their apologies aren't sincere. And I have no plans to interact with them anytime soon. Regarding them using the vacation home, that's really my parents' decision. Yes, technically I own it and cover all the expenses, but I bought it for them and gave them day-to-day control over it. They're good people and they always wanted a getaway place for the family, but there's no way they could have ever bought it themselves. I could afford to buy it for them because I've been fortunate financially, save, invest like a demon, plus I got a massive bonus the same year I sold my home and moved in with my now wife. I don't care if my folks let my siblings use the house, but I will admit I'm enjoying my sister's discomfort over finding out that I could afford to buy the place and let my folks use it while never mentioning it to them. Dad changed the lock code when they went up last week, so now only he, Mom, my wife and I have it. With regards to mom babysitting the kids, she tells me that once a week she and sometimes dad have been going over to each sister's place and spending the day with the kids. When school starts, she's going to pick each set up from school once a week on separate days and take them home, spend the evening with them. She says the 5 of them together stress her out, but separately they're fine. Mom and dad have both told me they don't plan on having my sisters and their families back to their place in the foreseeable future and that they're enjoying the quiet. My guess is that they were already tired of the old dynamic and used the pool party nonsense as an excuse to make some changes to the relationships. One fun note on why Oops post was removed from Ida. According to the message I just read from the other sub's moderator, the violence was property damage. I still don't get it. The phone's being ruined, I guess? Ridiculous. Update to the update, August 26, 2023, 9 days from previous post. Well, it's been an interesting last few days. I thought the shit had hit the fan before, but it was more of a fart compared to what's happened this week. For this to make sense, I need to provide some financial context. My folks haven't ever been any good at saving money. I've been doing their taxes for years, so I know pretty much everything about them money-wise. Their house is paid for and they have minimal debt, but they didn't save much for retirement. Both of them get Social Security, dad gets a solid pension and they have a bit of savings, but there's no treasure chest in the basement. I bought their current car for them after they retired, a retirement present so they could have something nice to drive. It was the first car in probably 20 years they didn't lease. My sisters are convinced the folks are dripping with money and that our parents will be leaving the 2 of them everything since I don't need more money, so they've never cared about saving either. Turns out my oldest sister and her husband, they have 3 kids, have been living beyond their means for some time and are in financial straits. They've maxed out their credit cards and are behind on their car leases to the point that one is about to get repossessed. He'd bragged in the past about making X per year, but it turns out to be about half that. She confessed all this to mom on Tuesday because they need a loan and because, and this was a WTF moment for mom and dad, that for the last 3 years instead of staying at the vacation house regularly, she's actually been renting it out once a month or so and pocketing the cash. We're talking $2,000 plus for a weekend and at least $4,000 for a week. With her being cut off from using the place, she's had to cancel one group already. She's now worried they'll lose everything. My folks aren't in any position to give them a loan. My other sister was aware of her renting out the place but of course hasn't ever said anything. I suspect she's done the same thing as well because I went up there once to drop off an ATV I had worked on and there was a family there who claimed to be staying there with my sister, her family, and that they'd gone to town for something. At the time I let it go. I figured she'd loaned out the house to some friends. But I've always wondered. I found all this out through my folks who are pretty stressed out about it, mom more than dad. He's mainly just pissed off about it all. I know dad feels betrayed. And I imagine he's embarrassed that he's in no position to help his daughter out. He did reiterate that as long as it's up to him, the girls won't be using the vacation home anytime soon. My folks let me know what's going on because they figured my sisters would put a full court press on me next. And they were right. On Thursday my sisters came to our place again, without husbands this time, and waited outside the door until I got home. I had to choose between fighting with them in public, them making a scene if I went in without them, or letting them in, so I let them in. I got a bullshit story from the older sister with the younger one backing her up regarding why I needed to let them use the mountain place again immediately. They also said I've been a shitty brother and that I needed to step up and plan on paying for their kids' college tuition since that's what family does. I let them pitch their story, then called them out based on what my folks had told me. Things went to shit from there. There was denial, crying, cursing, yelling, you name it. I swear my ears are still ringing 2 days later. Won't lie, I said some really mean and shitty things to them, but nothing that wasn't true. They finally left after about an hour. After that I took a shower and laid down. When I got up my wife was home and her first words were that she'd had to block more phone numbers because my sisters were blowing up our phones from new ones. Folks messaged me yesterday asking me to call. I'm sure my sisters have told them some bullshit version of what happened, but I'm not up to rehashing it yet. I'm usually a pretty energetic person, but this drama has me beaten down. I had just enough energy today to drive up to the vacation house and padlock the entrance gate shut. I'm the only one with a key. I'm guessing that will be enough to ensure my siblings leave the place alone. They'd probably die trying to walk 400 yards uphill to get to the house. New updates from here. Update 3 post, September 12, 2023, 2.5 weeks from last update. Yet another update regarding the cluster F that is my extended family. Thought it might be time given what's gone on over the past 2 weeks. After my sisters came to my place, my mom and dad told me they were done with managing the vacation home. Sounded like the sisters had been pressuring them to let them use the place again. Basically my folks handed the responsibility for place over to me and told me it was my problem from here on out. Up until then they'd kept track of who would be using it when, and they'd taken care of routine maintenance, replacing worn out items, etc. In any case, they decided they didn't want to be in the middle of all this crap. While I don't blame them, I'm disappointed because the damn place was supposed to be something for them to enjoy and hang out in, and they use it regularly. Plus I've never cared that they let my sisters and their families use it, because really I've always thought that was my parents' call even though I technically own it. But now my folks are going to be in the position of not having access without me being involved, and that changes the whole dynamic of the place. I've taken several steps to secure the place. I already mentioned that I locked the gate. It has a heavy-duty chain and the best lock I could find. I also did a full reset on all the door keypads and created all new codes. Security cameras got installed yesterday, which is actually pretty cool because the installer convinced me to put a high-res one that looks out over the valley. The system cost me way more than I thought it would, but the peace of mind is worth it. The installer also put up signs on the property saying the place was monitored by video. I also installed a heavy-duty lockout for the water shutoff, drain valve. I hope to hell I don't lose the keys for it, because if I do it's going to be a bear to try to remove. Haven't told anyone but my wife that the water is locked off and again, only we have the keys. Last week I got separate calls at my office from both of the husbands trying to convince me to let them use the house like they always have. The older one had gone up with some friends for a guys hangout but couldn't get in because of the gate lock. He was pretty pissed and embarrassed about being locked out. I'm sure he would have broken the lock if he could have. During his call he kept bouncing between pushy and victimhood. At one point he threatened to rip that gate out of the goddamn ground. He also admitted they'd been renting it out to a few friends, that they needed the money, I was ruining their business and that I should refund their guests' money. Me? F that. I should have recorded the conversation with him, but I don't know how to do that from an office phone anyway. The other bill just sounded like he was being made to call by my sister. He didn't really put up a fight when I told him not to plan on ever using the place again. In any case, I told them they can't use the place and not to ask again. At this point I'm considering selling the vacation home. Wife and I won't use it enough to justify keeping it, and it's not like there's going to be any family get-togethers there anytime soon. I mentioned selling it to my folks. Their response was pretty much whatever. I'd more than double my money by selling it. The place consists of 3 lots with killer views and is at the end of a private road. But I'll probably wait for a while to sell. Doing so now would be an emotional decision. My sisters and I aren't currently speaking and I have no plans to initiate contact. I don't know what the status between them and my folks is, and I don't want to. On the upside, we spent an evening with my folks last week, went to a new restaurant that was nice. No one brought up any of this crap. Mom did update us on the nieces and nephews. She's spending time with them at their homes. Sorry this update isn't full of laughs or owns, that's just life sometimes. Update post 4, October 16, 2023, 1 month later. A couple of people have asked for an update, here you go. I hired a guy to look over the vacation home. He lives in the area, takes care of his folks and manages a good number of properties. Some are vacation rentals, some are weekend places like ours. He has access to my camera feeds and does a physical check on the place every week or two. I think he may have the best job in the mountains. He gets paid to drive around with his dog, walk around the properties and hangs out on people's decks whenever he feels like it. He also has a camera feed from a house near the start of the private road that takes still shots whenever a vehicle goes past it. $450 per month, plus he'll do basic maintenance and repairs on an hourly basis. He's friends with all of the sheriff's deputies too. Got a lot of peace of mind from doing this. And he sends photos from his walks to everyone once or twice a week. I have to brag a bit on my parents. I got all this from them tonight at dinner. They were getting pressure from my sisters to demand that I open up the vacation house to everyone for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving up there had become quite the tradition for the family, not for me or my wife. We've gone once in 7 years. My dad refused to bother me about it because he knew I'd say no. They came up with what I think is a great plan, announced that they were organizing the Thanksgiving gathering and, if everyone split the cost in advance, they'd rent an Airbnb in the mountains. Otherwise they'd host Thanksgiving at their place or one of the sisters could host it. This caused a fight between the sisters because the middle sister was all for doing the Airbnb but the oldest one doesn't have any money. The deadline to commit to the Airbnb has passed. Looks like Thanksgiving will be at my parents' place. Regardless, we won't be there. My parents have asked that we not sell the place for now. They decided they'd still like to use it occasionally but not until my sisters have come to terms with the new normal. And of course they'd probably like it if everyone could get together there again down the road, but that's just not going to happen. I'd just as soon sell it and move on at this point, but I can live with keeping it if my folks do use it now and again. Plus it will be worth even more down the road. Wife and I have stayed no contact with my sisters and their husbands. Both sisters have called from new numbers, FU Google Voice, and left messages insisting that I meet with them for our parents' sake to work out how everyone can use the family vacation home. They called my wife too. I'm glad I was already in the habit of not answering calls if I don't recognize the number. I honestly don't know if they're delusional or if they think they can bully me into giving them access again. Don't really care. My parents tell me that the oldest sister and her husband are getting out of the leases for their SUV and big ass truck and are selling their jet skis and some other shit they've never needed. That's going to be really hard on her. She's quite the braggart and won't like being seen in something older, smaller, cheaper. My Bill's identity is very much wrapped up with his truck as well. He even has a small tattoo of the truck company's logo. Which frankly is one of the many reasons why he and I never hung out. Several people have suggested I make the vacation home into an Airbnb. I don't plan to do so, at least anytime soon. I know it would make money, but it would cause an incredible amount of drama across the family and would stress out my parents. They don't need that. It would also be a hassle to remove personal things my folks have there. That stuff has nowhere to go. And there would be wear and tear on the place. And I'm sure it would take some amount of time on my part, even though I'd use a manager to do it. Just not worth it to me. Update post 5, November 27, 2023, 1.5 months later. Wrote most of this yesterday but decided to wait to post it until I wasn't so wound up. Waiting didn't work, I'm still wound up. Sorry if this rambles, so much has happened, hard to write coherently. Things have gone to hell. I really, truly did not think anything like this would happen. Short version, my brothers-in-law broke into my vacation home and were arrested. They've been charged with breaking and entering, destruction of property and communicating threats, all Class 1 misdemeanors. I've refused to drop the charges. I might do so if I'm fully paid for the damage they caused. They were still in jail as of Saturday evening, I assume they're out by now. Things had settled down, at least I thought so. Haven't seen or heard from my sisters in over 6 weeks. My parents went up to the house for a week and had a good time. David, the property manager I hired, has worked out great. He's done a couple of repairs I asked him to do and I've given him a list that he's going to work on. He usually sends a photo or two of wildlife or a sunset to his clients every week, was kind of making me want to get up there. Friday after Thanksgiving my bills went to my vacation home. They used an angle grinder to cut through the chain on the driveway gate and damaged the gate in the process. They tried to get in through the front door, ruined the lock set and gouged the door badly. They finally got in through the utility floor door and a locked internal door. They also broke into the barn, I'm not sure why. When they went out through the front door where they were met by sheriff's deputies and David. David gets notifications from the camera system when there's activity. He saw what was going on and called the sheriff's department. According to David, the Bills tried to bullshit their way out of it, but the deputies didn't buy it. Breaking into an empty house is a pretty serious thing up there. Usually it's meth heads who ransack the place and hawk everything. When the Bills were arrested they freaked out big time, were saying how they were going to beat the hell out of me, etc. Not smart to do in front of cops. David and the sheriff's office tried calling my wife and me to see what we wanted to do, but we were spending the day with her parents and had left our phones in the car so we could be in vacation mode. So they booked the Bills on everything, which is what I would have asked them to do anyway. Bills called their wives from jail who of course freaked out. They called my folks, tried to call me, they're blocked, tried to find a lawyer up there to arrange bail, not easy to do given that it's a rural area and was a holiday weekend. Older sister has zero cash and her cards are maxed out, so if they made bail my middle sister would have had to pay for both husbands. I know they were still in jail as of Saturday afternoon. We didn't check our phones until late Friday on the way home from the in-laws. There were a ton of calls and messages from my mom, dad, David and the sheriff's department. Talk about ruining a great day. I was in such a good mood till I looked at my phone. My wife read through the texts and listened the messages, read them out to me, and by the time we got home I had some idea of what was going on. I put my brain back into thinking mode, tried to get past my anger, failed. Called David and got the rundown on what had happened and how bad the damage was, resulting in more anger. I ended Friday by calling the sheriff's department and telling them there was no misunderstanding. The Bills had absolutely no right to be on my property and I wanted to press charges. I didn't call my folks back. Barely slept. I waited until Saturday afternoon to call my folks. They were both pretty rattled about it all, my mom in particular. My sisters had browbeat them into telling me I should tell the cops it was all a mistake and that I wanted the charges dropped. I refused flat out, told them there was no way I'd do that until I spoke with an attorney and also not until I was paid in full for whatever it will cost to fix everything 100%. My mom was crying hard by the time we got off the phone, which of course made me feel like shit. My dad suggested it was time for a complete start over but also said he thought they needed to pay for the damage. I haven't gone up to the property yet. There's nothing I can do and I'll probably go nuts when I see the damage in person. The photos are bad enough. I'm hoping to tomorrow or Wednesday, but my job isn't one I can just wander off from for non-emergencies. I've left messages with 2 attorney friends asking them to recommend the right lawyers to go after my sisters and Bills. I don't know what I can do exactly, but I'm hoping to get restraining orders. I have all the texts they've sent me, that might help. I'm strongly considering suing them for the money they made renting the place. I don't care about the cash, but it will help make them as miserable as possible. The gloves are definitely off at this point. A couple of side notes. 1. Bills had no idea I'd hired someone to keep an eye on things or that there are cameras there now. My parents knew but hadn't told them because they knew it would just give my sisters a reason to drama up. There are signs on the property stating it's being monitored with cameras and no trespassing signs though. 2. My wife has completely had it at this point. I don't blame her, she's been more than patient about it all, but she reached her limit and was not shy about letting me know. She told me it's up to me how I deal with this, but that she thought they all needed to be taught a hard lesson. 3. Older Bill likely won't face any repercussions at his job over this, but middle Bill has a security clearance, so he might. I'm hoping that will be motivation for middle Bill to pay for the damages himself immediately. 4. David, the caretaker, has an interesting background. I knew he was friends with some of the deputies, figured it was because they were all locals. I was wrong. He was a cop in a big city for years, was shot on duty and afterwards decided to quit and move to where his parents had retired. He has some PTSD over it all. His dog is a certified service animal and is usually with him. I know law enforcement people tend to hang together. I guess that's how they became his friend group. 5. I don't want to see or speak with these a-holes for the rest of my life. I know this is in direct conflict with my overwhelming urge to make their lives as miserable as possible. Relevant comment. A lot of people have said I should have been hard-ass about all of this from day one. I've avoided it because it would have stressed out my parents and I hate this kind of drama, but F it, they're stressed out now. My wife has pretty much opted out of any more to do with this, doesn't want to hear about it for a while and says it's in my lap. She'll ease off on that, but I'm guessing she's not going to get involved from now on other than listening to me blow off steam. Edit. Regarding why they broke in, conjecture on my part, but I think they were planning on using it for family getaways and or renting it out again. According to David, the property manager, it's deer season through the end of the year. I know the Bills have used it in the past as base camp for big group hunting weeks. It sleeps quite a few people, so one event with friends could net them thousands of dollars. Again, I'm guessing here, but that would explain why they broke into the barn as well. I bought a 6-seater mule a few years back and they would want use that. I don't think they wanted to trash the place. It means too much to my dad and they both like him a lot. Update post 6, December 2, 2023, 5 days later. December 2, 2023, Saturday. Didn't think I'd be doing another post this soon, but a lot has happened over the past 2 days. Short version, I think the corner has been turned on this crap. Thursday afternoon I got a courier delivered envelope at my office. In it was a signed letter from both my brothers-in-law and a cashier's check for $5,000. In the letter they made what I have to say was a really sincere apology. Among other things, they acknowledged breaking in, acknowledged it was wrong, said the $5,000 was to pay for the damage and that they'd pay more if it cost more than that. Also said they'd stay away from the vacation home unless my wife and I specifically invited them. They also asked that I do what could to get the charges dropped as soon as possible because they both could lose their jobs and that they'd agree to a restraining order or whatever else it took for that to happen. There was more as well, all conciliatory, but that's the gist of it. To say this was a shock is an understatement. It was, obviously, a total 180 from their past behavior. I'd already made an appointment with an attorney to see about suing my Bills over the damage and to try to get a restraining order. I called him and told him what I'd just received and he agreed to meet with me at the end of the day instead of next week. Told me not to deposit the check. We met for about 2 hours. He ended up recommending the wife and I do a settlement and mutual release agreement with all 4 of them, sisters and Bills. He said if we went after them via a lawsuit that we'd almost certainly win, but that it could take 2 years or more, there would be sizable upfront legal fees and that we might never see any money. He also said we could keep the $5,000 free and clear even if we didn't let them off the hook. He's drawing up the agreement, it won't be ready until Monday. The agreement will include what's essentially the civil equivalent of a restraining order. I'd already asked my property manager to work up a bid to get the damage repaired. I called him after the meeting and asked that he get me as close an estimate as possible ASAP. Got that Friday. He thinks it will take around $4,000 to fix everything. Most of that is for the front door. On Friday my attorney contacted each of the Bills, told them what we were proposing and advised them to get their own lawyers. They both agreed to it. The middle Bill told him they could afford to either pay for the damages or pay for a lawyer, but not both, and they figured a lawyer wouldn't make any difference given that they really had no defense for what they did. His biggest concern was if the charges could be dropped. From what I can tell, they're willing to do anything, sign anything to make this all go away. My attorney also called the DA's office on Friday to discuss dismissing the charges, got the name of the prosecutor and left them a message but has not spoken to them yet. He thinks they'll dismiss the charges because the Bills are paying up and they have no priors, but then again he's not a criminal lawyer. Also said I should be prepared to drive up there Monday or Tuesday and tell the prosecutor in person that I want everything dismissed. He's also advised me to continue to be no contact with sisters and Bills especially for the next 6 months and that it will be really important to follow the terms of the agreement when it comes to future interactions with them. I'm guessing that the Bills' change of heart is due to them having figured out what's at stake for them, what it's going to cost them in legal fees and fines and so on. There's also the, highly unlikely, possibility that they could go to jail for up to 120 days, and as I've mentioned one of them has a security clearance for his job that could be at risk. So this is their Hail Mary pass to keep their normal lives. This isn't a perfect resolution to the situation, but at least it will get me past the legal and financial parts of the shit show that I've been in for the past few months. I doubt I'll ever have a civil relationship with any of them ever again, and that's fine. What I want most at this point is to close this off, get on with my life and never speak to any of them again. I'm exhausted from this. Wife feels pretty much the same way. Kind of a side issue, but getting the written apology was, weirdly, a huge moment for me. I wasn't expecting that ever, but apparently it matters to me quite a bit. The money doesn't feel particularly important at this moment. I'll damn sure take it though. Also, I'm pretty certain my middle sister and her husband came up with the money. The cashier's check is from the credit union of the company he works for. Once things are signed, I plan to make one more update, probably just an edit to this post. I'm sorry for being so pedantic. Writing these posts has helped clear my head and the feedback has really helped. I truly appreciate everyone's comments, insights, and support. And I really hope none of you ever have to go this kind of nonsense. Relevant comment. To be honest, when I finally got home Thursday night, I cried from relief thinking this might all be over. I'm not going to discuss the settlement with my folks until it's signed by everyone. My sisters, Bills can if they want to, but I'm not. It's between me and them. Final update, December 7, 2023, 5 days later. Tuesday morning, I met with my attorney, went over the agreement. Changed a couple of minor things, and he sent it to my sisters and brothers-in-law. It included a requirement that they pay my attorney's fee, about $3,000. They weren't happy about that and tried to negotiate it away, but he told them they either accept it as is or there would be no deal at all, and we'd proceed with suing them for the money they got from renting out the place, wear and tear from renting it, repair costs from their break-in, emotional distress, lost income from having to deal with this, attorney fees, and whatever else we could. He also told them I would push hard with the DA's office to prosecute every charge. Short version, they came in and signed. I wasn't there. I'm told it was a pretty tense environment, that the middle bill appeared to have taken charge, and that at one point he told both of my sisters to shut the hell up or he was walking away from the whole thing, making his own deal with us and the rest of them could all go to hell. They provided another cashier's check for $2,500, claimed that's all they had. It's close enough that we're going to accept it as the final payment. Attorney also told me that everyone was very cold and curt towards one another, but that they all managed to keep it together long enough to sign and left without making too big of a scene. I drove up to the vacation house early yesterday to check out the damage and meet with the DA's office. Seeing the damage made my blood boil. It was so senseless. I was so pissed that I was ready to eat the cost of repairs and do everything I could to ruin their lives. Tried walking it off, failed utterly. Ended up calling a good friend who was kind enough to stay on the phone for over an hour letting me spew and vent. He eventually got me back to focusing on the bigger picture of putting this behind me and getting on with my life. Honestly, I'm still not sure that's what I want to do, but I settled down enough to get some food in me and I felt better. After lunch I went to DA's office. Hadn't made an appointment and had to wait a while, but got to meet with the assistant DA who's got the case. Short version is that since I don't want to prosecute and the Bills have already paid for the damages, that they are willing to drop all the charges except trespassing, which in this case will be a Class 2 misdemeanor. The Bills will have to plead guilty and pay whatever fine the judge sets. I'm also told that if they fight the trespassing charge or ever so much as fart in public up there, that it would go very poorly for them. It helped that the Bills didn't resist arrest. If they had, none of the charges would have been dropped. I also went by the sheriff's office to thank them for getting there so quickly and everything. Wanted to thank the deputies personally, but only spoke to the dispatch person. And I tried to meet up with David, the property manager, but couldn't get hold of him. A couple of notes: the agreement includes a no contact clause. Basically, if any of them show up where my wife or I are, or the other way around, whoever got there last has to leave immediately. No contact except through attorneys or other mutually agreed upon third parties. They get to keep whatever they made from renting the vacation house, my big give, unless I have tax consequences which they will be responsible for. And we release each other from all other liabilities up through the present. There's more to it than that, but those are the high points. Wife and I will sign the agreement later today. After that I can't talk about most of this, but I can talk around it. I think this is my final update regarding all this nonsense, but I'll respond to comments if I can. As I've said before, posting about all of this and reading folks' thoughts and responses has been really helpful and has probably been key in my being able to handle this in a relatively healthy way. So thank you all again. Relevant comments. I had a hard time not being vindictive, but right now I'm glad I wasn't. If they cause more drama down the road I'll probably regret it, but if they follow the agreement that won't happen. The family dynamics are, like you said, pretty much effed. I've only told my parents that we're trying to work things out, nothing more. They may or may not be okay with the way things will be moving forward, but I had to do what was best for my wife and I. I'm guessing that my sisters have told them a very slanted version. That's just one more turd I'll have to swim around. Really, the agreement is more a formalization of how things have been for the last few months. I know it's not how my folks wanted things to go, but I'm pretty happy with it. Have your sisters ever shown this level of entitlement before? Not really. Not towards me anyway. We used to be okay, never very close but not enemies. Looking back, they started to resent me when I bought a loft when I was 25. At that point neither of them owned a home, but both had met their future husbands. They definitely didn't like that got a place before they did. It got worse when I met my wife. They didn't like that she was part of a wealthy family, especially since I was doing pretty well by then myself. Accused me of being elitist and such. When we got married I moved in with my wife, her condo was close to where she was doing her fellowship, and I sold the loft. Our wedding was fancy but reasonable, but the sisters were definitely envious about it. After that they and their husbands got pretty petty and we started minimizing our involvement with them. The profit from selling the loft, being frugal and not having a house payment are what enabled me to buy the vacation home for my parents. My folks were okay with hiding the fact that I owned it instead of them because they knew my sisters would be bitchy about it and say that I was using my wife's money. I didn't. Most of our finances are separate, though it definitely helped that I didn't have a house payment. Up until this crap started I actually thought we were okay in the general sense. Our daily lives are very different and I can't pretend I enjoy being around them for more than half a day, but I didn't think they hated me. I did know that both sisters had become pretty spoiled, entitled, but it wasn't my concern. And I didn't have any real conflicts with my brothers-in-law either, just almost nothing in common with them. I guess that's a long-winded way of saying I didn't know they were all such assholes. One last thought. My small fantasy at this point is that I never hear from them again.